Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming to our presentation this afternoon. Today we want to discuss some changes that we are proposing in our training division, as well as how to do that. One of the things that we firmly believe in is once you identify a problem, we believe that it's firefighter culture to mitigate that problem. So let's just dive right in and take a look at the presentation. What we've identified within the realm of training within the fire department is in three different areas. These areas revolve around the inadequacy of the training, the staff that is needed to do so in training, or rather the firefighter level of training, and identifying a career path development. From the years of 2014, we ran just under 2,500 calls. It was around 2,200 calls that we ran that year. Obviously, with 2017 not finishing out as of yet, we are projected, however, to run around 4,800 calls. So rounding that up to 5,000 calls, we're looking at our call volume has doubled in a span of 3 years. And it isn't just on firefighting, it's calls related to EMS, hazardous materials. And so we believe that our training department ought to encompass a all hazards approach due to the call volume that we're having. With the increase in call volume, you see the need to increase also your level of training in order to provide an adequate service to the visitors, residents, and critical stakeholders of our city. So next, we see that while we're maintaining our state mandated hours, just maintaining isn't enough. We need to increase the level and the adequacy of our training, and going into the needed staff. This is how we accomplish this. By having 3 well-trained firefighters on an engine, you can see that given the number of building fires that we had in 2016, and you compare that to what was saved in property losses and life prevention, not life prevention, but preservation of life and the preservation of property, the figures that we come up with, each well-trained firefighter on an engine company, not to include the ladder company, has an economic impact on the city of up to $600,000 per firefighter. So, given that, the staff is the crucial element to this in who we want to train and bring up to provide that level of service that's so desperately needed in our city. Now, in saying that, we want to develop our staff. In 2007, we noted that there was a need for a training officer or a training facilitator. And so, as it took a while to implement, but in 2011, we can see that the training hours went from around 4,000 hours logged of training for the entire department to 6,000 hours of training. And once the training officer was promoted to a battalion chief, that spot was never backfilled. And so now, into 2012, we see a decline, and that decline has plateaued back to the 3,000 hours, which again meets our state mandated requirements. So, in saying all this, here is our proposed solution to these problems in training. Evaluation of our current organizational flow. Our organizational flow chart, as you know, has our chief and then our deputy chief, but one of his responsibilities and roles is not only training overseer, but the deputy chief is also the facilitator of our training programs. And we being a metro department, our deputy chief has a lot of demands on his time, and while he wants to pour himself into training, he's unable to do that just given the sheer nature of his responsibility. So we want to evaluate our current organizational flow, and we want to implement changes in our standard operating procedures and guidelines that allow us the flexibility and leeway to implement a training facilitator that would answer to our deputy chief of operations. Implement potential changes in current job descriptions. As it stands now, we have a firefighter, a fire apparatus operator or an FAO, and a company officer on all of our apparatus that are going out of the stations. And in order to maintain the level of emergency medical services, we also have trained EMTs and firefighters, trained EMTs and paramedics. Also, still we're sending out 3 firefighter, paramedic, and/or EMTs on every call, and we want to look at those job descriptions and see what changes need to be implemented, and implement those changes into implement job specific training. That flows right into the next point. Is we want to take those positions and implement those changes into those positions, where when we train on job specific task, and it implements the overall effectiveness of how a scene is managed and ran. And then implement a specific career path development for our personnel. The unique thing about the fire department culture is that not everybody desires to be the fire chief or the deputy fire chief. Some people are perfectly content with being firefighters or fire apparatus operators, or maybe transitioning into the fire marshal's office. And we want to allow those avenues to create, one, an atmosphere of a happy, encouraged employee that would go out and provide a service that is very much needed in a passionate manner. And we accomplish this by allowing training to meet the individual on their needs that in the larger scope affects the overall effectiveness, that affects the overall success rather of the training division. The way we believe that would be a positive move into implementing this is reclassify one shift personnel to training facilitator, meaning that we would take one person off of shift and make that a staff position, a weekly employee that would facilitate the training for all 3 shifts. We believe that by implementing that, that's going to create a better flow and continuity of training. And with our new Target Solutions computer-based training, we're able to run parallel with practical training on what we're learning on the computer, and one facilitator helps that continuity across the board. Being that we haven't backfilled that position from 2012, we still have that line item budgeted, so it would not affect our general funds budget. But we would hire that person, an additional firefighter, paramedic, or firefighter EMT to backfill that spot that we moved to the training facilitator position. Also, to make this a success, we would implement monthly firefighter practical assessment and benchmark drills. And what this is going to do is not only meet our state mandated requirements, but it would also allow us to work on state mandated requirements, as well as For example, NFPA, National Fire Protection Association 1410, which is the national standard for engine company operations and things of that nature. And we would incorporate that into benchmark drills. And the question that was immediately raised in my mind is, how would we measure the effectiveness and the success of the program? We would develop a something specific for our department by utilizing research pulled from the Georgia State Training Academy, Firefighter Training Academy, and our evaluations would be done so and evaluated on 3 criteria: the delivery of the training, whether that be computer-based training, practical-based training, how is it effective in its delivery? Was the pace of it, did it keep your attention throughout the process and duration of the course? The quality of it, what can we do to make it more realistic? How can we make training safer? How can we train for the larger event to make the larger event successful? And also on the instruction, meaning the instructor. One thing that, as a facilitator, he would need to designate one person on each shift as a training officer aide or a position similar to that. Mainly just it's tough for one person in a department our size to manage that, but to oversee it completely, the facilitator would have an instructor on each shift as kind of a go-to person, as an instructor, an assistant, and the method in which the delivery and the quality comes from the instructor. You know, those would be the areas that we evaluated the success of an implementation of our new training program. I would entertain any questions at this point. If there are no questions, thank you all so much for coming, and if I can be of service at any time after this presentation, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you.